felt a woman's touch in years.
Okay, what are you talking about? What is this? What the hell is this?
I can make you my girlfriend. Put some lipstick on you.
Help! Help!
Nothing else will do.
Jesus.
I'm a literal brain rot baby. Total goblin mode.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Hello, fellow basement dwellers, and in today's video, I will be doing my very first Versus video. I've done like Versus when it comes to like a universal scale or, a factional scale, but this is my first Versus video where it's two individual characters. Now, the two characters in question, of course, are going to be Angron from 40k versus Conquest from Invincible. Now, let's get into some stats real quick before we actually do the matchup, and let's start with Angron. Now, unfortunately for Angron, we really don't get many absolute strength feats in his demon form. And yes, there are three forms of Angron. There was his uncorrupted form, his Demon Prince form, and then his, supercharged Demon Prince form. But for this video, we're going to be using just his normal Demon Prince form. Now, one of his best strength feats is back in his uncorrupted form. Before he was a Demon Prince, where he stopped a Warhound Titan from crushing his brother. Now, he was able to pretty much shoulder press the Titan for a little bit, but it pretty much cracked every bone in his body, tore every muscle, and made a bunch of blood vessels, burst. So, this is definitely a bit beyond his weight limit. Now, for those of you who don't know, during times of, immense stress or, fear, when your best friend Lorgar is about to be crushed by a Titan, you can use more your strength than you can normally to a point where it can actually hold your body. We've all heard of the time where a woman was able to lift a car off her kids, and also world's strongest man Eddie Hall actually hypnotized himself in order to, deadlift 1,000 pounds, because Eddie Hall actually hired someone to pretty much put him in a trance that made him think that he wasn't lifting 1,000 pounds off the floor, he was lifting a car off of his kids. So, in these life and death situations, you can use way more strength than you can normally. And so, that's why he got so hurt lifting his Titan. So, normally he is not strong enough to lift a Titan, but in this situation he was. Now, pretty much almost the entire weight of the Titan was being pushed on him. At first, they're just going to step on little Lorgar, but then they put all their weight behind him, and they couldn't. The Titan was, had a giant boulder thrown at it, so he didn't actually just defeat the Titan. He just, held it off for a second. And well, I say a second. It was like a good couple of seconds, but very, very powerful feat. Now the Titan weighed in between 410 tons and 420 tons. Let's just go with the latter and say the higher than estimate. Now that is an effing ridiculous strength feat in general. Now, again, I want to clarify, we don't have an absolute wall strength feat when it comes to his demon form, but his demon form was mildly buffed, and I say mildly buffed because Angron was an absolute beast before he became a demon, and he was pretty much an absolute beast after, so there aren't too many big, wall strength differences between his demon form and his base form, because as his base form, he was already an absolute one of the strongest Primarchs. To the point where a berserking Angron was said by one of the more combat-active Primarchs, was said by Corvus, that the only two people who could stop him were Horus and Sanguinius. Those are the only two guaranteed people who could stop a berserking Angron. And then, of course, during the Siege of Terra, Sanguinius did stop a Demon Angron who was slightly more powerful. But Demon Angron's, best feat is his regeneration. Now, for example, one of his best regeneration feats is he was covered in... This is Demon Angron, by the way. He was covered in promethium before then being set on fire. Now, at first, I thought that this was a massive feat because promethium burns at about 900 degrees. Translated to Fahrenheit, that's about 1,650 degrees. Now, that is insane heat, especially given that the promethium on his flesh burned for a good couple minutes. But after this good couple minutes, when that fire went out, his skin was charred and peeling off, but his demon regeneration, helped him regenerate it. And he was able to regenerate his flesh in just a couple minutes. Also, just to note, right before he got doused in the promethium, he pretty much was attacking a massive tank column and he was able to pick up and throw an Exorcist tank. Now, an Exorcist tank weighs about 40 tons, which, again, is pretty insane. And it really didn't seem like it was that big of an issue for him. But it also didn't seem like it was, just throwing a piece of wood. It didn't. When I was recording this video, I could have swore it was 40 tons. My bad. It is actually 32 tons, so my bad. So it didn't seem like it was throwing something light, but it wasn't something heavy. That's why I actually think his, non-demonic form is about as strong as his demonic form. Obviously, a bit of a strength buff. I would put his max, demon strength at being able to lift 500 tons. Because, again, that is me kind of wanking him a little bit. That is me kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. We haven't seen that. Again, obviously you do get buffs when you join Korn, but I could honestly see an argument that his max strength is still 400,000 tons. He could barely lift that amount of weight for a couple seconds in his normal form, and his demonic form isn't said to be too much physically stronger. He's always been one of the physically strongest brothers, so his demonic form was never really said to be that much physically stronger than his normal form. But let's just say 500 tons, give him the benefit of the doubt that that's his absolute max. This would kind of make sense that why he was able to chuck a 40,000 tank without too much drama. One thing to note, though, is that he's kind of a glass cannon. Not only did 1,650 degrees really try and damage him, he was damaged by the tanks that were only using 120 millimeter guns. Now, in case you're wondering, 120 millimeter is what a lot of modern tanks and artillery use. And don't get me wrong, they obviously didn't put him down. And I want to clarify, he did not just take on one or two of these. He literally flew through what is described as a wave of fire. So literally hundreds, if not thousands of these artillery shells and tank shells, he was able to fly through, although he was left heavily damaged with dozens of flesh wounds, bleeding everywhere, and just, very damaged. But in a very short amount of time, he was able to, regenerate. So his regeneration's a big issue, or I should say a big benefit, but yeah, you kind of get what I'm saying. Also, the chucking the tank feat really does kind of, track along Angron's character, because during his fight with Lionel Johnson, he was easily able to chuck tanks at him, multiple tanks. So yeah, able to lift about 500,000 tons, and gets hurt by what is the equivalent of modern tank rounds. So Angron is pretty much a glass cannon. Now, his two weapons, which are able to, inflict a lot of damage onto beings, of similar power to himself, is his axe, which is a chain axe, and his sword, which is actually a Slaneshi demon. Now, both of these are very powerful weapons, and he can hit things as hard as he wants, and these weapons will not break, so they at least scale to his strength. So they at least scale to his strength, and definitely surpasses durability, which is fairly lackluster. Alright, one last thing before we move on to Conquest. Angron can pretty much fly like Superman or fly like Viltrumites. Yes, he does have those freaking buff wings, but given that he can fly in space, it's very clear that he flies similar to his brother Sanguinius, where the wings are just for aesthetics and he can pretty much just fly like Superman. Alright, now on to Conquest. Now, I think one of the best ways to, scale Conquest is to actually scale Mark, because we can very clearly see in the Conquest vs. Mark fight that Conquest is really just effing around the whole time and only lost because of his arrogance and because he was literally just goofing around. Now, Mark was able to literally just relax in lava for 7 minutes. For any of you who have not watched the Invincible TV show, I swear I am not making this up. I simply cannot find an image of him, in the volcano. But he's in the volcano, he emerges out, he's there for 7 minutes, it's part of his training. I can't find an image, and at first I was literally just gonna take a picture on my TV, but I thought that'd be too low quality. Now, this lava was most likely about 1,300 degrees to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, of course. And, yeah, he was there for 7 minutes, and yeah, he was a bit tired, and, he was a bit hot after, but he kind of just looks like a kid who got out of the hot tub. And literally the only thing he said is, hey, I'm going to have to get a lot more suits, because his suit was there, but he was fine. Now, that is completely insane. Now, keep in mind, about in between the, 1,300 degrees to 2,200 degrees, would be Angron's feat of surviving the Prometheum, which was, again, about 1,650 degrees. Except that, for only a similar amount of time, let's say 7-10 minutes, left his skin very charred and peeling off. So it's very clear that when it comes to heat resistance, Mike, and by extension Conquest, is going to be way, way above Angron. Again, keep in mind that putting Mike against Conquest was pretty much like putting a... It'd pretty much be like putting a featherweight UFC champion against freaking Brock Lesnar. So pretty much every Mike feat has to be massively, let's say bare minimum 50% more goes to Conquest. And keep in mind, that is me low-balling it. Like, that is as low as I can go. Conquest is easily double Mike's strength. So 50% is very, very low-balling it for my boy Conquest. When it comes to strength, I honestly feel like Conquest has Angron beat here. Because, for example, after the fight with Mike, was kept under a 400,000 ton, slab of tungsten, which he was able to escape literally by shrugging. Now, I want to clarify something. Being trapped and not being able to not even move and being able to just shrug and bend solid tungsten and, just move that much tungsten, 400,000 tons worth, that is effing insane. Even though it's the same 400,000 tons, that is still way more than anything Angron's ever shown. Simply because being able to move 400,000 tons when literally your bones crack, your muscles rip, and your blood vessels explode, having it be your absolute limit only for a couple seconds, versus Conquest, who could literally just shrug and get out of there, yeah, it's insane. It'd be like a dude who goes to the gym, lifts 500 pounds, and literally breaks everything and can barely do it, versus a dude who goes up and lifts 500 pounds with one hand. Yeah, it's the same feat technically, but one of them very clearly put all their strength into it, while one of them, it was just a side project. Not to mention, if we calculate the weight of the Earth that was also weighing down on Conquest, that easily doubles that, if not more, because these guys were super, super far down. And on top of that, the massive explosion that Cecil had planted, he also just tanked with zero difficulty. Literally broke out of prison by shrugging and flying upwards. Even if we, give Angron the benefit of the doubt and say, oh yeah, he can easily move 500,000 tons. Conquest being able to move 400,000 tons plus with zero difficulty is still way above that. Now, when it comes to speed against these two, I didn't really cover Angron's speed, but I'm going to be honest, Viltrumite's speed is super hard to calculate because there's so many feats, and yet there's so many anti-feats. So, for example, you'll have a high-level Viltrumite like Mike, who has, normal dudes, straight-up normal dudes, like, for example, Darkwing, who are able to keep up with them. Darkwing has shadow powers and everything, and he is very physically fit. He's like an athlete. But when it comes to his raw power, he's just a dude. So this very street-tier individual is able to keep up with Mike, and by extension, Conquest and Nolan. Meanwhile, you have times where the Viltrumites are going dozens, if not hundreds of times light speed, and they're able to react at that speed. So the flight and their speed and invincible is cartoonishly wonky, but because there's so many anti-feats, I'm going to put their speed at... I'm just going to put their speed at custodian level. So, fast enough to sidestep bullets, but still significantly slower than light speed. And that also, kind of tracks to Angron, because custodians can typically keep up with Primarchs, and Angron, although he's very strong, can, kind of barely outspeeds Grey Knights. Grey Knights themselves being, slightly below custodian level. So I think both Angron being custodian speed and Conquest being at custodian speed, just to, pick the middle between the low lows and the high highs for Conquest. And, I think they're both about relatively equal in speed. But again, in strength, it's not a contest. Now, the real question is durability. Now, we've already established that Angron's a glass cannon. So is it two glass cannons fighting? Good God, no. Remember that time Mike Grayson flew into a nuclear bomb and it barely knocked him on his butt? That's a nuke. Angron had a very real chance of getting killed by artillery. Angron has taken damage from 20mm guns, real-life tank rounds. Conquest has taken nukes and been fine. I'm sorry, Mike has taken nukes and been fine. And because Conquest is over double the strength of Mike at this time, and it's very clear that Mike took a nuke with 0 damage. Like, look at Mike! 0 damage after taking a flipping nuke. Meanwhile, again, Angron gets hurt by modern tank rounds, or the equivalent of modern tank rounds. So, yeah, in terms of speed, they're about even. In terms of strength, Conquest has a good chunk on him. And in terms of durability, Conquest has way more durability, infinitely more durability than Angron does. Now, let's get into combat IQ. Angron has pretty much 0 combat IQ. He pretty much fights like a chimpanzee on cocaine. Now, Conquest's combat IQ is both low and high, because he can immediately be like, oh yes, Adam Eve, you're getting tired, how long can you last? So he has a very high combat IQ, but he intentionally kind of acts kind of stupid in order to, you know, lengthen the fights and enjoy the fights. So, if Conquest is going in for the kill, he has a literally 10 trillion combat IQ because of how much experience he has. Way more combat IQ than Angron. But if he has, you know, if he just wants to enjoy the fight, which he will want to enjoy the fight with Angron, he's not going to want to finish it immediately. Then you kind of get what I'm saying, right? But either way, even if Conquest is just effing around, he still has way more combat IQ. Now, this is such an interesting matchup. Also, one thing to clarify. Yes, Angron's axe and sword would be able to damage Conquest, but I can't really see it being more effective than a punch. Again, Conquest did take a punch was able to take multiple punches from Mike, someone much weaker than him, and did take a teensy bit of damage. So Angron, the only reason Angron has even a chance of winning this fight, because if it's straight hands, Angron takes a punch full force, his head's coming off, because Angron cannot take the same abuse he dishes out. Meanwhile, Conquest can. Like, yeah, Conquest did, you know, get hurt from someone weaker than him, but it took multiple, you know, full-powered headbutts from an enraged Mike to, you know, do this to him. Meanwhile, again, Angron gets hurt by tank rounds. So, Conquest can at least take a good couple punches from someone as strong as him, and Angron is probably in that level of close to, you know, as strong as him. So Conquest can take a good couple punches from Angron, but anytime Conquest punches Angron, it's going to be immediate damage. That part of his body is just obliterated. Now, I want to clarify, Angron is a demon, so the easiest way to get rid of him is by, you know, banishing him, but you can banish demons by just blunt force and brute force. One thing I will give to Angron, if Conquest gets injured, that injury stays. Like, don't get me wrong, Viltrumites do have super regeneration, but they're not Wolverine. It's gonna the super regeneration takes a few days, at least a few hours. So in the middle of a fight, the regeneration doesn't really matter. Unless, of course, the fight goes on for days, which it probably won't. But demons, especially demon princes like Angron, can regenerate quite literally in a matter of minutes. But heavier injuries do take longer. Now, all in all, the only way, you know, Angron clutches this fight is if he is able to, you know, get some really good stabs in, or, you know, cuts in with his blades, which, simply put, I don't see it. If these two fight, Conquest is out to F around and have fun, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's stupid. If he gets hit by that sword and it will damage him, he's not going to let it happen again, or at least it's very unlikely. Or more than likely, he's going to attempt to break the sword, which I don't think he's going to have the strength to do. So he's probably going to try to disarm Angron and, you know, get into a fist fight, which he will easily win. But even with those two weapons, it's fairly unlikely that he gets a good, you know, shot at his neck or, you know, shot at his vitals. Out of 10 fights, I will give it to Conquest 7 of them. Angron and his weapons and his strength definitely have the ability to halt Conquest, and if Conquest took each of these fights seriously, like immediately going for the kill, I would give him 9 of them, but because of his arrogance and him wanting to, you know, enjoy the fight and prolong the fight, And the longer the fight goes, the better, you know, the Angron will have, because he has unlimited stamina and unlimited regeneration, unlike Conquest. But even then, Conquest stats are just a good chunk higher. Conquest, his speed is relative to Angron, his strength is a good bit higher, his durability is infinitely higher, again, able to take nukes. Meanwhile, while heavy artillery barrages have a whisk of banishing Angron. So yeah, all in all, I'm giving this fight to Conquest. But if Angron had a higher combat IQ and was able to, you know, coordinate and, you know, properly, intentionally go for things like the neck, then it'd be more of a 50-50. And if Conquest was, you know, more bloodlusted and trying to, you know, go for the kill instead of just, you know, go for the enjoyment, then Conquest would win 9 of these 10 fights. Alright, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Do you disagree with my power scaling? Do you agree with my power scaling? Sorry this video was a bit of a drag. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. I can't believe I'm at this many subs already. Thank you so much, and I will catch you in the next one. Also, one thing to note before I leave. I've actually been talking to a fellow 40k YouTuber known as Killer Studios. Go check this guy out. He has some good content, and he's a really nice fellow. But he gave me an interesting point while I was talking with him about this video. He was telling me that what I was doing was a safe comparison. I was taking the most central ground. I was taking the safe comparison. Sometimes, though, safety and what makes sense isn't what is needed. Sometimes you just need to take 2 action figures and just slam them together. And that is exactly what I'm going to do for a brief segment. Now, if we take the highest of the highest of the highest speed Viltrumites get, they're like 50 times light speed, if not more. And Angron at his absolute peak, being fully juiced by corn, is straight up planet level, able to cut planets in half, take Titan beams directly to the head. I'm not even gonna bother calculating that. Survive the sun, survive just all nuclear weapons stuff, Exterminatus level stuff. He is literally like above planet level. He's literally able to cut a planet in half. So if freaking Lightspeed Conquest were to fight him, most likely Conquest is still just gonna charge up to him going full speed. And even though Conquest is way, way, way stronger, and, you know, well, not really stronger, but way, way faster, Angron is still probably going to catch him, or at least the impact of a swing is going to get near him, which will be more than enough to kill Conquest. Like, straight up, if you take planetary Angron versus, you know, Conquest, even though Conquest is way faster, he's not going to use that speed the most intelligently, and so he's still going to try to fight him directly and get cut in half or whipped apart, eaten, anything. Yeah, planetary Angron absolutely demolishes Conquest. One thing I'd like to clarify, though, yeah, Viltrumites are not planetary level. Nolan, someone who's on, like, that same level of Conquest, technically had a planetary feat, but they even said if the planet wasn't, you know, super weakened, he would have died on impact, so planetary Angron would easily kill Conquest. Alright? Have a wonderful day.